Serena, let's start off by talking about you. You've had an incredible career path. You've traveled around the world, you've worked around the world. What were your inspirations and influences when you started to work on architecture?
So I think the main flow that brought me arrived to Japan was my interest in nature and how architecture can relate to nature. And it all started from Sydney and then Melbourne, where I got impressed by the vastity of nature and landscape. Is very, very impressive. And then I've studied in Brazil, where I had the opportunity to get in touch really with with buildings from Oscar Niemeyer, Lina Bobardi, Paulo Mendes da Rocha, that also had the same connection to the nature and to the community and the intention to make it feel like one unique thing. And at the end, I arrived to Tokyo, actually at the end, in 2014, when I joined Sejima and Ishizawa, that are the founders of SANAA office. And in 2015, I started to work on the new National Gallery. And that was a very interesting process because I was able to be involved in the entire design process. And that's something that really stays with you and influences you for the entire approach you will have on architecture, because it's a very different approach to the context, to reading what's around the site and how you can influence, you can impact on the surrounding, not only in a physical point of view, but also in a philosophical point of view.
And how did Tokyo, how did Japan influence you?
I think what's very interesting to me, working with Sejima and Ishizawa, is that Tokyo is very gray. There is very not much nature. There are not many trees. No. But in any case, as we see also here, it's very important, I think, in Japan to keep a continuity between what's humanized and what's nature, and the approach to this matter. Compared, I think, to the process that I experienced in Europe, I'm not saying that context is not taken care. I don't want to be misunderstood. But what I mean is that there is much more attention on the present and the future. Also the past, but in a more experienced way. It's not only about making a building that somehow refers to an ancient Roman path that was there 2,000 years ago. It's more about what's important there now and what's important for the community, for the environment, for the future. So I think this is the approach.
So for you personally, how do you get inspired? What is the start of the planning process for you?
So I will speak on behalf of Sejima and Ishizawa, and I think I will take as an example the new National Gallery. When we started with the competition in 2014, we visited the site. But sometimes you cannot really go, and we saw also with COVID, you cannot always go. But we found a way to get there, and technology helped us with that. And everything starts with the context. So also here in the park, the main element was the relation with the park. The park was really the starting point for the concept to have a building that is a continuation of the park. So also the inside out, the fact that not only people that are only interested in culture would experience that, but also people that just want to have a run in the park, somehow naturally and smoothly can get in relation with the building, and so with culture as well, with art and culture.
So tell us a little bit more then about the National Gallery project, or UNMZ Galeria project. What's the next stage?
Well, I think the next stage is what we can see already here today. I think we really hope to see it realized next corner, because I think that a cultural building has the power to create a bonding relation between the building, the people, humans, and through art, which is very important. I'll take as an example also a project that Sejima is doing in Inujima. It's a very tiny island on the south of Japan. And also there, a way to revitalize the community, the feeling of part of one thing is through art and culture. So I think it's a very good experience to realize and to take consciousness about, because I think a multicultural building can really put together different cultures, and we are here sitting together, people from, I don't know, many places in the world, so it's an opportunity that it's very interesting.
So that maybe brings us to one of those big philosophical questions about architecture. Does architecture shape society, or does society shape architecture?
I think none of these. I think I think it's the context and the environment that shapes society and architecture. So it's the way we perceive the context and the environment that has an impact on the way we structure society or we think about architecture.
So we come back to this project then, because I remember when I was in Budapest, living here, there was some sort of controversy, a lot of controversy around the Liget, the project here. We've now got this fantastic building. We've got the Néprajzi Museum just over there. How do you see the National Gallery project in the context of the whole project? Because, of course, that's just the next step, and there are others as well. How do you see the whole context then?
I think that in Budapest there is the opportunity that you can only have once. You have a huge park, the city park, which is a urban park, the most ancient urban park in Europe. And there are similar parks in the world, like in Brazil, in Mexico, in New York. And the opportunity to bring together cultural poles in one area, I think has a really powerful meaning for community. And also to be an experience on how represent different topics important at the moment. So, as I said, we are here now doing this, but then we have the Ethnographic Museum, which is all about our heritage as humans. And then we really hope that, I think, through the introduction between all these topics, we can make a good experience for the future. And I think it's a urban park, so I think we should look at it also like in contraposition to another building, another museum that Seijima Nishizawa did in Japan, the Kanazawa Museum, that was in a urban context, was not in a park, but also there they tried to get a continuation of the city through art. And the effect of that was that art and culture were accessible to everybody, even to people that normally would never go to a park, to a museum. And it brought like millions of visitors to the building, and not only because of the museum or the specific exhibition, but also to experience a new type of building, a new type of relation.
Now we talk about new buildings, and parallel to building, we also tear down to existing buildings to create or recreate a landscape, and then that sort of brings us into the sustainability argument. Does SANAA have a sort of corporate view on sustainability in architecture?
Yeah, so sustainability, I think, is a very important topic, as we hope everybody takes care. But also in our office, we try to achieve always the best sustainable certificate, but like sustainability is not only about being green or like a certificate. It's also about an environment approach in how to use resources and take care of that. And the topic about tearing down buildings, I think it's a bit complicated in a way that we always question ourselves when we face a new project if it's correct to add something. Because I think this is the main question. Is it correct to add a new building in a specific site? Or can we partially reuse something of what is existing in the new building? Because sometimes there are like toxic materials, or the energy that we will need to use to keep the building will be higher than making it new. So there are a lot of aspects that you need to take care, but you need to question yourself about that. And what we do is we try to understand if we can reuse certain part of it. Or I think the question is also how we used to build before. Like, I think sustainability is also about flexibility. Is the building you are designing flexible enough to keep pace with the changing in society, with the needs, with what the building shape is, the plan layout. So I think it's also important to plan a new building in a flexible way to avoid future demolition.
When I was in Tokyo in June, my first visit to Tokyo for 7 years, I noticed that the shelf life of new Japanese buildings is very short. They build, and after 10 or 15 years, they knock down and build again. In a sustainability context, that just seems to be crazy.
Yeah. I don't know if how many architects are here, but normally a lifespan of a building is 30, 50, 100 years for very specific ones. In Japan, a building is demolished every 15 years, and there are different aspects. One is about earthquake. So every sometimes, since there are earthquake, you know, you've been there, like many earthquake. The other aspect is that I think in Tokyo, from my experience, the real value is not on the building, but it's on the land. It's an island, tiny island, and this is where the point of view can be maybe criticized. I don't want to do it now, but the real value is not on the building, it's the land itself. So last year, for example, they demolished a building that is one of the most important buildings for metabolism, is the capsule tower by Kurokawa. And it was just demolished because it was difficult to maintain, was difficult to put people in. So they just demolished. They were able, I met the people like in charge of this, they were able to save some of the capsule and send to museums around the world to witness that cultural heritage.
Talking about, for example, bringing down that particular building, what are the sort of techniques that you as an architect are using to sort of have sustainable buildings or self-sustaining buildings? We talk about sustainability, but what does that mean in practice in the new buildings that you are designing? Yeah,
so I think I spoke before about certificates. So there are certain guidelines, even also by regulation, about how to make a building which is sustainable. For example, at SANAA, what we try to do is to work with the engineers and try to go even beyond that. So what we do is to check with simulations what's the behavior of the building itself. For example, if you take a sun shading, and which means a lot of energy then to cool down during summer. But can we design the building? Can we make the shape of the building be more efficient to reduce the amount of cooling, like energy that we need at some? So we try with simulations, so with technology, which is very helpful right now, to do that. And it's not only during the design of the building. We also simulate how is the life of the building after. So can we make a choice today, which maybe is more expensive, but that will save a lot of energy consuming in the future? And this is also very important, I think, not only think about the real present, what I'm investing right now, but it's also what I'm leaving for the future.
Earlier this week, there was a very interesting article in the Guardian newspaper in the UK about the new British King, King Charles III's very clear views on architecture. Most notably, 30 years or so ago, he made a television documentary criticizing a lot of the brutalist architecture in the UK, and in particular, criticizing the fact that much of the new architecture then seemed to be remote and divorced from communities. And this article was talking about whether, in fact, with some of the new thinking on architecture and building in society, in communities, but whether actually his criticism has had some consequence. I wonder whether you want to talk a little bit more about architecture in the context of urban communities or communities generally.
I think when you plan a building in a urban context, you are somehow making connections. You are choosing as an architect, you're choosing what to connect, how to connect. And sometimes the main important point is not if you find or not a solution, we always find, but is what question you ask. Are you choosing the right elements to connect or not? Because somehow when you build, you are subtracting from nature a space that you cannot give back as it was given. And I think what you mentioned about King Charles III. We can also mention, for example, there is I know it might sound maybe strange, but there is a book from the Pope, which is very interesting because I think it takes care about sustainability and the environment sensitivity from a community point of view. And I think this is really the point. Like, we have a global problem. So I think we need to have a common aim, a common goal, and then we should aim for it. And it cannot be common for everybody. I mean, as SANAA, we built buildings in Germany, but also in Israel, in Italy, so very different climate situations. But we were always able to find a solution which is sustainable and that still always give the same message. So I think it's just important to find the common goal.
Looking ahead at design and style, are there current architectural trends to follow? Are there particular leaders, if you like, in architectural design thinking? What's the future look like?
I think the future looks like consciousness. Consciousness as we as humans, we are not something separate from the world we live in, but we are one thing. You will always find people not agreeing on the aesthetic of a building because it's done by another human. So it's the judgment. But you will never find a human not agreeing with the beauty of a landscape because it's nature. It's there. It's there. And I think the consciousness of the fact that it's not that nature gives, it's just that we take, because nature is there. It is. So I think the consciousness and the new trend is how to use what we have and how to plan the future buildings in a way that can help us to preserve what we have. For example, also at SANAA, we always say transparency is very important, but it's not only about having a beautiful glass facade. It's also about having light inside, trying to preserve as much as possible some type of connection between inside and outside, leaving as much space as possible to let nature go through, even though it is a humanized environment. So I think this is the new trend.
And are there particular sort of thinkers, architects that are sort of leading the way on that?
I think in general we are all doing a good job.
I'm sure.
I wouldn't choose it. I think it's too difficult to answer with a specific name, I think.
And you've said that consciousness is very much part of that sort of the future or the current and future philosophy. Are there particular philosophies, architectural philosophies from the past that are definitely out of fashion and being dropped? What's getting the Room 101 treatment of being kicked out to make space for this new philosophy?
Yeah, I would like to answer to you about who, from the very past, who already understood the trend. Because I think in architecture, as in everything, also economy, there are cycles in a way. So I think we are going back to the root. If you think that Vitruvius was the first man that recognized architecture as a science. We are talking about the 30 before Christ. And what he defined, not only the meaning of architecture, but he also said architecture is an imitation of nature. And I think this is really a key point today. So I think we are going back there. For sure, we can do much better. I said before, we are all doing a good job in a way that we are all sharing the same goal and common aim, but I think there is still a lot of work to do, because if you think a carbon zero emission building, there are certain things that still we don't know how to reach, but we are studying in how to achieve that. And I think that's very important now. So from the past, I will say that. And
this is a slightly left field question. Much of the discussion in the last 2 days here has been talking about data, artificial intelligence. Are there any aspects of that you're bringing into your work, particularly in the context of trying to build sustainably and self-sustainably?
For sure, because for the new National Gallery, we worked a lot with simulations, any type of simulation, from simulation, as I say, from the sunshade, which was very important because it's a natural context. There are no other building close to it to make shades. So we really needed to understand how to design the building in a way that we need only the minimum possible amount of energy to run it. And of course, was also a wonderful tool to design it, like to be inside of the building with just a screen. It was amazing, and we really hope we will see once from real. And I think it's very, what I mentioned before, the life cycle analysis.
Yeah.
And this is all about also how you manage the building in the future, and not only for like money point of view, but also resources point of view. You can really try to make an efficient use of the energy and on the replacement to maintain the building, for the maintenance of the building itself.
And for you personally, so looking ahead, what's next for you?
Well, I don't want to repeat myself, but I hope to be back here for the construction of the building. If you will ask me what's my favorite building, I will for sure say right now my favorite architecture is the new National Gallery, and I hope you have a look on it. So I hope that's the next, what's next.
And for the audience here, and I guess most of the people probably here are from Budapest, I would guess, and this is their park. What's your sort of final message to them about the National Gallery project, the future? What do you want to see going ahead?
I suggest you to rethink about the meaning of present and future, and to live the present as a future and the future as a present, because I think that no one imagined probably the power of this building, but I think we can all see, and also all the other elements of the park. And so my message is to always think about it and how every action has an impact. And I hope to meet you soon here.
Well, I think that gives plenty of food for thought for everybody out there. Serena Di Giuliano, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.